How do we parent in such a way that our kids are encouraged to move out of their comfort zones, but still they're protected from experiencing burnout and chaos? And how can we help them succeed at what God has gifted and called them to do? This is where I'm living right now, y'all, and I have so many more questions like these. But today, in episode number 87, we're going to get some of these questions answered as I continue my conversation with New York Times bestselling author Jon Acuff and one of his lovely daughters, McRae, who together with her sister, Ellie, wrote the amazing book, How Teens Win. If you missed episode number 86, head back there first because you'll want to catch the first part of this interview. But I know you're going to love this chat as much as I did. We're diving deep into parenting teens, so listen in. Do you feel like you've been given a raw deal? Like maybe things did not go the way you'd imagined, or like you're struggling at times to just hang on to the faith that you wholeheartedly believe in? Well, my friend, you have come to the right place, and you are not alone. I'm Shelly Snead, your host of UnPerfect, and it's my weekly mission to inspire women just like you and me to persevere in faith through authentic stories and experiences that are rooted in the truth of God's Word. So hang on. Hope and probably some humor are coming up. Well, let's jump into this next question. One of the things you talk about in this book is the performance zones. And this was a poignant chapter for me when I was going through it with my kids, because I asked them, I was like, hey, what zone do you think you're in? And it was very interesting to hear them get honest with themselves and be like, I think I'm in the comfort zone, or I think I'm in the chaos zone. So can you tell us a little bit about what these three zones are that we might find ourselves in?
Sure. So the three zones are the comfort zone, which we talk about a lot online. People are familiar with that one. So We have a lot of words for that one. We'd say she's in a funk. He's in a rut. We joke it's the pajama pants zone. Like you're just stuck. The opposite of that is the chaos zone, where you're trying too many things all at once. Like you're juggling a million different balls all at once. You've signed up for every activity. And kids today feel that because there's just pressure to they've got to be busy constantly. And then the middle of those two extremes is what we'd call the potential zone, where it's kind of the Goldilocks zone, where you're doing the right amount. It's not too hot. It's not too cold. It's where you're performing at your best. And again, it's personal because you might say, I'm the type of person that I need both an after school sport plus a job on the weekend. Like that's what potential looks like for me. Somebody else might go, man, I really need some unwind time on the weekend. I can't be at a grocery store also because I'm busy with wrestling or I've got all these other things. So those are the three zones. And Cray, it'd be interesting. Where would you say of the chaos or the comfort zone, which one would you say is more tempting for you to fall into?
To the comfort zone, because I don't particularly love change. And so just staying where everything is the same.
Yeah. Yeah. And college forces you out of that in a lot of ways. And so does camp. So even as you say the comfort zone for you, I think there's a lot of examples that as a parent, it's fun for me to watch you deliberately get out of that. Because very few people would say 9 weeks in a cabin with no air conditioning.
Right. And no phone.
Everything, no phone is comfortable. So it's fun for me to watch Cray deliberately get out of the comfort zone and mix things up in a way that I would say is brave.
Yeah.
I love it. And so what would you give as maybe some advice that for how kids or teens can escape that comfort zone or to avoid the chaos zone? I know even as a parent, I have lived way too much of my life in the chaos zone because I didn't know there was another way. So what advice maybe could you give?
Yeah, with comfort, I think a big part of parenting is inviting your kids into who they are. So I think part of your job as a parent is you're a mirror. You mirror who they are back to them and go, hey, I think you might be in a funk because you stopped doing this. Like you love connecting with friends and you haven't been doing that lately, I've noticed. So what if you reached out to a friend? Like you reflect back to them like, hey, you haven't hung out with anybody in 4 weeks. Maybe that's lacking. The other thing is finding creative ways to invite them out of the comfort zone. I don't think you can force somebody. I don't think you can drag them out. I think there's part of parenting, and Cray would agree with this, is like if we push too hard on things, it makes them want to do the opposite.
Right.
Understand? It's like kids are human too. In the same way that if a friend of yours said, you have to do this, this, and this, and this, and this, you'd go, well, I'm not doing any of that.
Right.
Like you're bossing me around. You didn't invite me into it. You tried to force it on me. So an example of that would be, we paid Ellie and McRae to read a bunch of books one summer. So we felt like there were some books that had fallen out of the high school curriculum that were important books. And so Jenny and I worked with them to come up with a list. Like they were part of the list. And they got to drop a book they didn't like. What book did you drop? I think did you drop Catch-22?
Yeah.
Yeah, she didn't. So like Catch-22, which is kind of a satire classic. Joseph Heller, you're like, ugh.
I did not know what was going on. This is too secure.
Yeah. So like she had input in that. And we also paid them. Like we incentivized them in the same way that like when I say to adults, like we paid our kids to read books. And if they go, well, you shouldn't pay them, I always go, did you get paid at work this month?
Right.
Like, did your boss give you a check? Or if you like, so that was, instead of just saying to Ellie and McRae, you're not reading enough books, you got to read more, I want you to be inspired to read, and kind of playing the heavy in that moment, we came up with a game. We came up with a plan. We gave them a voice in it. And that created a moment where they both got out of their comfort zone. Chaos zone is a little harder, I think, because as a parent, the way they're funneled into sports and activities now, it's hard for you to go, I think you're doing too much, because that's where their friends are. So, but I think as a parent, you can see when they're headed to burnout sooner than they can. I think that's just true of humans. Like Jenny can tell when I'm overscheduled faster than I can, because I'm in the middle of the frenzy of the schedule. So I think sometimes it's finding ways to invite them into activities that are kind of outside their norm. So like Jenny was really good at, we would go camping. Like, cause I don't care who you are. Like when you're alone in the woods with just your family, there's not a lot else going on. You got no service. You can't update Instagram. There's no one else around. And so I think creating moments where it's easy to escape the chaos zone, whether that's a road trip, like whether that's hey, we're all going to put our phone, down during dinner, finding moments like that where you can invite them out of the chaos zone.
I love that.
How do you think, what would you say are ways Mom and I encourage you out of the comfort zone?
I don't really know. You just it's kind of like itself, like you do it yourself.
Oh, you feel like you do it more?
I feel like, because if someone tells you to do something, you're not going to necessarily do it. You have to be at a point where you're willing to change.
Yeah, I would say that. But I also think one of the things we joke with McRae is that Jenny will force her to go shopping.
I hate shopping.
McRae, hey, you did it today.
It's horrible.
She did it today because she came home from college for the semester, and we were like, you need new jeans or whatever. And you were not going to go take yourself to get jeans. She hates shop. I don't like shopping either. I think some people, it's a joy. Yeah. Some other people, it's a chore. There's a chore girl right here. Mm-hmm. And so I watched from where we're sitting, Mom drag you to Nordstrom Rack?
Yeah.
Yeah, Nordstrom Rack.
She doesn't even want to talk about it, Dad. It was traumatic.
It's not like actually my comfort zone. I just don't like it.
I would say you're very comfortable not shopping. That's comfort zone. That's comfort zone.
Awesome.
So I would say there's times when as a parent, you do go like, hey, we need to make this happen. Like, and the other thing we do that we're deliberate is we do it when they're best able to hear the advice.
Oh, that's
like
good.
We didn't do that at 7 p.m.
Right.
Like we did it right after breakfast. You had a coffee, you're ready to go. The day is young. Same with Jenny. There's things I'll ask her at like 4 p.m. and she'll go, whoa, that is I just had coffee conversation.
I love it.
Talk to me tomorrow at 9 a.m. Because I'll give her some big complicated, like there's a banking thing we have to deal with. And she's like, whoa, hey, tomorrow when I'm at my sharpest at 9 a.m., let's do that. So that's part of it too, is like learning your kids and figuring out how best to work, as a family.
Absolutely. Listen, my daughter and I had a drop down knockout fight the other night, and it was my fault because I brought up something really hard for that at 9 p.m.,
Yeah. And we've all done it.
Yes.
We've all done it. Where, like, or right before you get to a dinner party. Like if I say to Jenny, I ask Jenny some huge question right before we walk in, I'm like, and she's like, wait, we need to talk about this for an hour.
Right.
Like, we got 4 minutes. We're almost at the Robinson's house. And she's like, don't you do this to me. So I think that's part of it.
Yeah. And I love one of the things y'all do in the book is you give some great questions. McRae, you were talking about you have to be at that point yourself where you're ready to move out of the comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those questions are fabulous. Like, what will it cost me if I don't do this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They're just some great questions. And I find myself using some of the terminology in this book when I'm having conversations with my kids. Like, hey, I know you don't really want to do this, but what's it going to cost you if you don't? Or, you know, those kinds of questions.
Well, and they help clarify that, you know, I might not feel like it now, but like one of the things we talk about is like your feelings are only one point of information. They're not the only one. If you only base everything off your feelings, there's a lot of times you'll never do the thing you really want to do and need to do.
Absolutely.
So registering for classes for college, you can drag your feet. It's just going to mean you're going to be in the 6 a.m. aerobics class, which I was junior year because I dragged my feet.
Right.
So now with McRae and Ellie, we'll go, hey, you should put your deposit down for housing the day it opens because that's the best way to get the best housing. So let's come up with a plan for that. Let's make it easy. But those are the kind of questions of if I don't do that, what'll happen? And you go, you'll get left with the room that's left. And the room that's left is not the one anybody wants. So like set a schedule. And it's also like just the other day, McRae got up at 6:30. It was your first day home from Christmas break. Got up at 6:30 a.m. to go walk with Jenny because she was walking with a mom of one of McRae's friends. And she was like, oh, I'd love to see Miss Carrie. And so she set her own alarm.
Caroline was there.
And Caroline was there, another one of her friends. And that was McRae going, what will I miss if I don't do this? I'll miss seeing Caroline. I haven't seen her in a semester. Like I'll miss seeing Miss Carrie. So like, she didn't get up because she was like, I'm on the grind. You got to get up at 6:30.
Rise and grind.
Like that wasn't the relationship motivated you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. But if you told me to do that, I wouldn't.
Yeah. That's honest.
Yeah. If you're like, get up at 6:30 tomorrow, I would have been like, no. Yeah,
because it was her first day of vacation. But the pull of the friend and the pull of the connection was natural momentum for her. And that's what's fun as a parent is when you see that happen with your kids.
Absolutely is. And I'll add to that too. I think it's great. You talk a lot about mentors and y'all talk about that in the book, Craig, about, you know, if maybe your parents aren't the one to help you with this, maybe this middle goal, you know, you're going to need some accountability. It can be somebody else. And I think as parents, we have to be secure enough in ourselves to realize our kids are going to benefit from being with other adults who can speak life into them, who can disciple them. I'll never forget. I remember telling my middle school son how you should really have a quiet time, you know, maybe every morning where you read your Bible or whatever. And him being like, oh no, I got this whole faith thing. I don't need that, you know, because he knew everything in the 8th grade. But he came home. It might've even been 6th grade. He came home from student group, youth group at church and said, I need you to wake me up at 5 a.m. because youth pastor says I need to be having a quiet time. And, you know, my flesh could have been like, well, I've been telling you that every day. Yeah. But no, I was like, yay, there are adults that I'm putting in my kids' life that will speak into them, that they can hear it from better than just me. You know what I mean? It
does say you do have to be secure because they're going to tell you things. They're going to tell other people things they're not going to tell you because, you know, like,
True.
Amy Fenton was Ellie's small group leader from 6th grade to senior year. And they had a relationship that was outside of our relationship and was so valuable and was so important. And you're right. As a dad or a mom, you kind of have to be open-handed with that and say like, this is, you know, and I would even say friends are the same way. Like if they have good friends and even within a family, one of the things Jenny and I are deliberate about thinking about is how do we allow them space to be sisters where they're not just siblings? Meaning like we don't have to be there. Like they have a standing breakfast. They both go to Sanford. So they have a standing breakfast. I think it's every Tuesday. Mm-hmm. Every Tuesday. We're not part of that. Like because what happens is what I've seen it with older kids is if the parents force themselves every time, like, hey, you're both going to be there at this mountain house. We're going to go. or like, hey, we're gonna,
Right.
and now they're siblings again versus becoming friends and becoming adults, and so learning to be open-handed with that, where like they have their, like if you have more than one kid, there's a group chat about you that you're not on, like you just deal, that's happening. That's like, I know that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go.
That's awesome. Yeah. And that's so true. Our 4 kids, we went somewhere recently, and the 4 kids were in one vehicle and Art and I were in another. And when we got to where we were going, they were like, we just had the best time we've ever had in our lives.
Yeah.
Like, just because they could be themselves. I love that. There are so many great things in this book, and I'll put links to it for my listeners, because we didn't even get into the goal ladder, which has been life-changing for me. And
Great.
And just talking to my kids, because setting big goals is so overwhelming. For me, I'm ADHD, but for my kids too, who, like you said, with all the stuff going on with social media, I'm reading Jonathan Haidt's book right now, The Anxious Generation, and it's
it's terrifying.
It's terrifying.
It's good. It's really good.
But I'm watching some of my kids who are living that, anxiety now. And so anyway, it's just given me ways to say, hey, let's make an easy goal first. What can you accomplish today? So I love that. But I do want to ask you one more question.
Sure.
I have a lot of listeners who have expressed to me their frustration, their guilt, their regret, even maybe about having kids, teenagers or young adults, either that have walked out on their faith, or maybe they're just hurting because they're not living up to their potential, or they're still living in their basement and thinking, I'm never going to be an empty nester. Art and I have these conversations every once in a while, like, is this really ever going to happen? But I just wonder, and I'd love to hear from both of you, because I think it's key too for us as adults to listen to 20-year-olds and 19-year-olds and 18-year-olds tell us how they would like to be heard or treated. But what is maybe one piece of advice that each of you would give to parents who might be listening now, who are maybe feeling a little bit hopeless about their kids' maybe lack of motivation to set and go after goals, or whatever they see there as, not happening on a timetable they'd like to happen?
What would you say?
I would say that, like, there is no, like, standard timeline like that, like, especially with, like, social media and everything. You're like, okay, they're going to be out of the house by 21, married by 24, kids by 26. Like, you have this like expectation. And so not to have expectations of them, but not like let other people's lives, and especially like social media and like society's expectation, like even add more pressure onto them and like onto your like viewpoint of them.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's a great point, McRae. What I would say is I would kind of echo you in saying, give them time. Like, one of my favorite stories is a friend of mine was saying, my 16-year-old doesn't have his life together, and he doesn't do goals, and he's irresponsible, and all the stuff that like a dad might list about a teenage boy. And I was like, well, when did you get your life together? And he was like, well, I was about 34. And I was like, so no offense to your amazing parenting. You might shave off 1 year with your amazing parenting. You're not shaving off 17. Why do you give yourself as a parent 17 extra years to develop into the person you are,
Yes.
but you expect your 16-year-old to be that then? And I think it happens because as parents, we yearn for our kids to see what they can do, to not make the mistakes. I don't want McRae to pay for a single bruise she doesn't have to pay for. But that's not how life works. And so there's things that you just have to, again, I've said open-handed a couple times on this episode. You have to be open-handed and know that that's part of parenting. And also, like, I know my own life. There were things I didn't figure out until my late 20s, my early 30s. There's things I'm figuring out at 48. Like, I don't feel done, or like, oh, now I'm wise and I don't make mistakes. So I think if I can remember that, it hopefully takes some of the pressure off of McRae. And then as a parent, I would just say, like, apologize to your kids. Like, I apologize. Like, there's times when I blow it and I have to come into McRae's room and be like, hey, I'm sorry I made you feel like a jerk over something that doesn't matter. Like, I was afraid, and out of my own fear, I overreacted to something that wasn't important. Like, I'm sorry I did that. And she's so fast to go like, I forgive you. Like, but you have to have that, because like, I'm going to blow it. Like, I'm just gonna, and I have to be willing to go apologize to Ellie, apologize to McRae. And so I think that's a big part of it too, and trust that they're not going to then go, well, I guess my parents are human. They blew it. They already know you're human. Like
sure.
They already know, like, we tease each other in a kind way, like, about the silly things we do. McRae has said a million funny things. Like, she said, you're the one who said, she said, Dad, you're either OCD or no CD. Meaning I'm either super detailed or not detailed at all. Mm-hmm. Like, that's a very,
and then in that manner, you put the Ellie saying that in a book instead of me.
Yeah. And then I misquoted and said Ellie came up with it. So that's what she was
no CD right there.
Yeah.
That is great.
That's what she was ultimately insulted by, was that I didn't give her the attribution. So your kids are seeing your faults. Like, it doesn't do any good to pretend you don't have them. Like, admit them, apologize. It gives them the room to apologize too. Do you have anything you want to apologize to me for?
No. You should still owe me for that one.
Yes, true. You're fine. You're fine.
I think you get the next book dedication. You might have already had one, but
yeah, she's had multiple. She's fine. It's so funny.
No, that is great advice. We got to be honest with our kids because they see it anyway. And I love how you phrase that, overreacting out of fear too, because I mean, it's ultimately our love for our kids that sometimes makes us psychotic, right? Because we so don't want them to experience the hard stuff, but that is how we learn the best ourselves. So very, very impactful advice from both of you. I thank you both so much for taking this time to speak to us.
Thanks for having us.
Yes. And
it's super fun to meet you. I'll see you at camp, hopefully.
Yeah.
There were so many great nuggets of truth and ideas for parenting our teens in this episode. So I just want to close with this. What is your next step? That's going to be your homework today, okay? Which one of these strategies or truths that John and McRae and I discussed do you need to put into action or put out in front of your mind to remember today? Like, maybe you and your teen need to identify your current zone. Are you in the comfort zone, the chaos zone, or are you riding steady in the potential zone? And just consider some small adjustments to move you toward that potential zone if you're not there. Or do you need to remember that in this season, our role as parents is probably going to be best utilized as guides, not always enforcers, where we can gently and creatively encourage self-discovery and balance for our teens, but give them some wiggle room to do that for themselves too. Or perhaps, like me, you suck at timing. Timing really does matter. We've got to engage when our kids are open to listening. And we've got to be good listeners too. Or maybe you need to be more intentional about having godly, wise people in your kids' lives. Mentors and friends are awesome for providing fresh perspectives for our teens. Maybe the next time you have dinner or game night with your amazing couple friends, have the kids be a part. And get those kiddos to a strong church or faith-based student ministry with strong mentor leaders. I cannot stress that enough, and how impactful that's been in our family. And how consistent are you at acknowledging mistakes? Maybe that's the thing you need to go after today. Modeling vulnerability. Your kids already know you're jacked up, okay? So let's let them know that you're a work in progress just like they are. And lastly, where can you let go of some rigid expectations and maybe spend a little more time celebrating progress on their timeline? That's been a hard one for Art and I lately. I do encourage you to go grab this book, How Teens Win. Grab the audiobook and listen to it in the car with your kids or around the table. I promise your kids are going to prefer to listen to others their age give them this advice more than hearing you give it. Nothing personal. Remember, we thought we knew everything when we were teenagers too, right? I would also love to know what strategies have worked for you in helping your kids step out of their comfort zones and make and set some goals in their lives. I'd love to hear from you at hello@shellysnead.com, or better yet, subscribe to the UnPerfect newsletter. The link's at the end of the show notes, and let's keep this conversation going. Check the show notes for links to the resources that we discussed today and others you may be interested in along this topic. And as always, I am praying that you are able to see glimpses of God's glory in the now and the not yet of your unperfect life and maybe your unperfect parenting this week. I'll see you next time.